Hey girl, Marissa here. You are listening to the Codependent Dummy podcast. As a young woman, you have been raised, reinforced, and rewarded for putting the needs of others above your own. Now, in your 20s, you're finding yourself exhausted, exasperated, and enveloped in shit relationships, especially the one you have with yourself. Codependency is a way of being where we put the feelings, wants, and needs of others above our own in an unconscious attempt to meet our own feelings, wants, and needs. Sorry to break it to you, sis, but that is not sustainable. This podcast is to help you undo all that so you can stop playing small and start taking up space, you dummy. Let's get to it. Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to the Codependent Dummy podcast. Happy to have you here. And today we have Gina Metcalf. She is a licensed therapist and founder of North Star Therapy. She's based in San Diego and serves clients all throughout California via telehealth. Gina specializes in working with female identifying individuals from their 20s through their 50s on issues of anxiety, depression, trauma, and codependency. Gina herself is a 30-something Mexican-American millennial therapist that's down to talk everything from the neuroscience of trauma to astrology and anything in between. Gina, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Awesome. All right. So first things first, Gina, how do you conceptualize, how do you define codependency?
So I'll start by saying that I think codependency is one of those buzzwords out there right now that has a really narrow and misunderstood definition that most people, when I bring up in a session, sort of think, oh, it means I want to be around like my boyfriend all the time.
Yeah.
And as a therapist, I'll say I didn't really learn about it in grad school. I work with other therapists who are clients, and they don't really have a great understanding of it. And so I've sort of had to develop a definition for clients. So I'll start with my definition, and then I also tend to give clients examples of what codependency can look like. So I can sort of read through those too, if that's helpful.
Yes.
So for me, codependency is essentially consciously or unconsciously abandoning or ignoring your own needs, feelings, and desires. It can be from something as small as correcting someone for pronouncing your name wrong to big things like not going to the doctor if you need to, or never expressing how you really feel to those closest to you, in order to ultimately maintain others' comfort, peace, well-being, and the status quo. So overcaring for others while undercaring for yourself.
Okay. I'm gonna hear it again because it's so amazing. So consciously or unconsciously abandoning your own needs and desires. For example, not correcting the mispronunciation of your name, not going to the doctor, not expressing your feelings. What was the last part?
Those were the three. So yeah, the small one, not correcting someone for mispronouncing your name, and then two bigger ones of not going to the doctor, not expressing your feelings and needs to those closest to you.
Got it. Yeah, I get called Melissa and I go, and it's codependent, Gina, because I don't want to offend the person. And sometimes I have corrected and then they do it again
Yeah.
And I don't do it because I don't want to be cause inconvenience, disruption, offense.
Yeah.
Can't do it. I'm like, oh, sure, I'll be Melissa.
Yeah, exactly.
There are people in the world who literally they think that's my name. They go around and they talk about Melissa, and yeah, I'm just like, all right, I'll be Melissa.
Can I call you Melissa from now on?
No,
I would never.
Yeah, but yeah, consciously or unconsciously, it's more conscious now.
Mm-hmm.
So true. Okay, so that's your definition and examples. Anything else to add?
Examples? Well, I haven't gotten into the examples yet. There's a lot. So I can run through them. It's a list, and we don't have to go super deeply into them. But some common examples and behaviors to help people understand how it might look in their lives: people pleasing, fixing, rescuing others without others asking for help or without you asking if they need help, generosity and kindness to the point that you feel taken advantage of, feeling overly responsible for others' actions, feelings, experiences. Um, Basically, that looks like thoughts of, it's my fault, I should have known better, I did something wrong, and being very hard on yourself all the time when in actuality you may bear very little responsibility in the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Feeling resentful in relationships due to under communicating your needs and giving when you don't have the capacity, nagging and worrying about others making mistakes or struggling to let others be uncomfortable. And this is a big one. People think they're being selfless, but actually it takes away people's right to have their own experiences and learn. Perfectionism, feeling scared to make mistakes, struggling to ask for help, delegate, not trusting others to do things, staying silent, not speaking up when you have a thought, need, opinion, or desire, indecisiveness, overly relying on others to help make decisions and consulting many people on their thoughts before you do something, feeling like you're performing or have to be on all the time in social situations, always smiling and saying yes, often find yourself in relationships where you're listening or offering support and giving, and it's not equally reciprocated, lying, avoiding, and ghosting people, and you finding yourself often compromising your values or needs that might actually be important to you in order to procure or maintain a relationship.
Damn.
It's a lot.
So I am noticing you said this is a big one for the example, thinking you're selfless, but taking people's right to learn away from them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This is one.
How come that's a big one?
I think it comes up a lot with my clients, that one, and feeling really overly responsible. And when I frame it to them, these wonderful, giving human beings, as kind of frame it as a little selfish, actually. This is meeting your need to help, not their need to go through something. It's always a big one for people, and people become emotional and start crying, and really never thought of it that way.
Yeah. Right. So thinking you're selfless, but taking people's right to learn away from them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. People need to learn. Reality exists.
Yeah.
There are consequences to your choices.
Mm-hmm.
Things don't always work out in your favor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
But codependents are like, no, things work out. I'll protect you.
Yeah. I'm getting this image from Finding Nemo, and I might not get the line right, but the dad in the beginning of the movie says to Nemo, I never want anything to happen to you. And he doesn't qualify it as anything bad to happen to you, but it's just anything to happen to you. And I kind of think of that when I think of this one.
Yeah, Marlin is pretty, yeah, like Nemo, he has this little, for those of you who haven't watched it, it's a great movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, Nemo, he loses his mom in a traumatic, feeding.
Mm-hmm.
And the dad ends up raising him on his own, taking care of him, and just really wants to, almost treat him like a bubble boy in the ocean and trying to protect him. And Nemo, after a certain amount of time, wants autonomy. He wants to go to school. He wants to challenge himself, despite, right? He has like a little, sad arm.
Yeah. But very capable. I know. Yeah. He's a super codependent dad. Marlin. Yeah, that's his name.
Yeah. Right. He's taking away Nemo's right to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm curious, with those examples, with your definition, do you have experiences of codependency in your own life to share with us?
Yeah, I definitely do. The first example that comes to mind, and this is a weird one and one that I've always thought about, but only recently really understood from a codependent lens, is my first day of kindergarten. I was in the lunch arbor it was a super noisy, chaotic lunch arbor with grades K through 6. And I would not eat my chips because I thought the crunching would be too loud. And I remember sitting there wanting the chips, giving them to my teacher ultimately, and sort of like telling this story in a funny way, thinking, oh, I was a shy kid. And I think I was a shy kid. But now understanding codependency so much more, I can also see where, I was, my parents sent me to an elementary school outside my neighborhood school that was in a wealthier community. They used an address that wasn't ours. And so it was very much like, behave, don't draw attention to yourself. And I think I got that messaging very clearly.
Right.
And, my mom, being an immigrant from Mexico to the United States, had a lot of traumatic incidences growing up herself, and very much had that messaging that she passed along to me in a lot of implicit ways. And so, yeah, I have just like such a clear image of myself sitting there at this long table with hundreds of kids like screaming and yelling and just being like paralyzed with not taking one bite of a chip so that the crunching could be heard.
Right.
So there's that.
Because if you had, right, like, what did your 5-year-old sense would be a consequence?
Yeah, I think that I did sense that there would be a consequence of being, judged, seen, not liked. And I had learned already, like, stay neutral, stay liked by everybody.
Yeah. Or just picturing like 100 kids looking at you like,
I know. That would have been my nightmare.
Yeah. And being noticed. And right, I'm sure part of you sensed this, I guess, like snowball effect that could happen, which is I'll be noticed, I'll be judged, somehow I'll be outed and uprooted from this school.
Yeah, totally. And already sort of feeling like an outsider, and just that shape shifting we do to fit in and all that comes with that.
Shape shifting.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And from there, really, most of my codependency, I would say, has showed up in my 20s, probably teens and 20s, around men and dating and, maintaining this illusion of perfection, from the way I looked to how I spoke, to what I said, being, again, liked by everyone, being chill enough and neutral enough. And I think I sort of understood, as from a young age, I was always sort of felt like insider, outsider in a lot of communities I was in. I sort of understood by that point, what was, how to do that, how to maintain being liked by everybody, what was attractive, and sort of unconsciously played that part where that had a lot of external validation. And then I get years into a relationship with someone and couldn't maintain that level of perfection, because I, all of a sudden had some needs or raised an opinion, showed less perfect parts of myself. And, of course, that creates backlash from your partner because they're disappointed and confused that you're disrupting the peace. And then I would feel just anger and resentment that I couldn't be myself, and creates a really non-sustainable situation.
Right.
So that was my relationship pattern basically for every relationship I was in besides my current marriage, thankfully. Yeah.
What do you sense helped address the pattern?
I don't think it was anything conscious. I think I got really lucky with my husband, my current husband. It was, we met before I went to grad school and sort of had this greater understanding. And we were friends first, which is the only time that's happened for me in a relationship.
Wow.
And in a situation where I was sort of, not super interested in him romantically and actively kind of trying to turn him off, by showing these imperfect parts, but it really just, made him love me more. And so we started in a very different way, where I showed the worst parts first.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And he wanted you more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Such a sweetie.
Yeah.
Okay. And you go to grad school, become a therapist, and learned about codependency.
Not really. I didn't, I definitely didn't learn about
you learned it was
in grad school.
A girl wanting to be with her boyfriend all day.
That, and, of course, it's very associated with substance use. So you sort of hear about it in these ways, and those weren't necessarily populations I was working with. And so, didn't know much about it, honestly, really until like a year ago, through my own research. And yeah, so yes, but now I think I do know and understand a lot about codependency, mostly because when I started to learn about it, it resonated. And I was like, oh my gosh, like there's this whole thing that I didn't know existed and this is me, like, wow. So, when something like that happens, I think you understand it well, you sort of like research it a lot. So yeah.
And with your clients, how have you noticed that when they call and start seeing you and say, oh, I'm struggling with anxiety, depression, trauma, I want to be around my boyfriend all the time. How is it helpful for you to notice that at the root of that, you're sensing is codependency.
Yeah. So I'll say almost no one says I want to be around my boyfriend all the time. But I see it really as kind of in two ways. I see where a lot of people who maybe started out codependent first have then begin to experience anxiety and depression because they have gone for so long without getting their needs met. And so, of course, they are anxious and depressed. It's just like self-abandoning over and over and over again. And then I see where maybe people who started out with anxiety and depression have sort of slipped into codependent tendencies just because a lot of anxiety and depression, I think the messaging is around like we start to doubt ourselves, not trust ourselves, believe that what's happening to us on some level we deserve, believe we're permanently damaged, and it really impedes our ability to get our needs met. And so it sort of works in both ways where the codependency can come first or the anxiety and depression can come first. And I think with the trauma, kind of the same thing. Codependency, I see definitely as it can be a trauma response, especially to more attachment trauma, kind of long-term attachment trauma, less so with single incident trauma. And not all trauma, has to do with codependency, but
what's attachment trauma in a sentence or two for those who
yeah.
are inclined to bend their ear at that term?
Yeah. So really, again, kind of coming back to that term, shape shifting, having grown up in an environment where we bend our needs, attitudes, personalities, subconsciously or consciously to maintain an attachment to like a primary attachment figure, usually.
So
At the
mom, a
cost of
dad.
our own, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
At the cost of our own needs, usually. And it's very unconscious. And it's, as we know now, trauma responses are just ways of surviving. And attachment is the first and most necessary way that we survive. And so it's really deeply ingrained.
Right.
Yeah. So there's that. So there's, again, you can kind of see where maybe a traumatic, ongoing traumatic situation would breed kind of codependent patterns. And then also, again, where maybe a trauma happens, and then we sort of have some side effects that look very codependent. I really think a huge component of PTSD and experiencing trauma is, removing trust from ourselves and others and leaving us feeling responsible for these terrible things that have happened to yourself or to loved ones when maybe we bear little to no responsibility at all. Puts us in a mode of wanting to fix and control everything. And yeah, so it's there. It's so tied in to me. I see it so tied in with most of my clients' anxiety, depression, and PTSD.
Yeah. I know I went to therapy throughout my 20s. And yeah, my initial call, I was not saying I'm codependent.
No.
Right. I was anxious. I was depressed. I was on the struggle bus, not knowing, what really was underneath. There are layers.
Yeah.
And so, really getting down to the core.
Yeah.
It was my conscious and unconscious abandoning of myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, I loved, you said earlier, you talked about the codependent lens. How do you sense your clients benefit from knowing that, early on in their therapy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I usually within the first session, if not definitely by the second session, define codependency, give examples, and most of my clients, like 99% of them, are like, holy shit, I feel so called out right now, seen right now. This is me to a T. And nobody has ever been able maybe to put the exact words to their experience. And so at the very least, it helps people feel understood, seen, and hopeful, because there's so much to do with codependency. And I tell them that. And then beyond that, I think it really clicks with clients immediately how important it is to start working on that part. And as therapists, something I always hear is, oh, it's the hardest part with clients is getting them to make behavior changes. And I find that describing the codependency really helps people just understand, like, okay, that's what this is. And there's an action plan, such a clear action plan that involves, you know, identifying the feelings and needs, and then validating them, and then doing something to get the need met, which usually involves setting a boundary or communicating.
Right.
And most people start right away, like even people who have never set a boundary, and we start really small and work up to bigger things. But it has helped move clients so much more quickly than when I was just sort of working without addressing the codependency, essentially. It's been, within a month, I noticed clients just making huge strides.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
So identifying the needs, validating the needs, and then being empowered to take action, as opposed to just misdirected, misguided, less fruitful attempts, focusing on trauma, or focusing on anxiety, or focusing on depression.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally.
Why are you depressed? where does the anxiety stem from? Yeah. How is your trauma response related to, your self-abandonment? Yeah. Okay. So when we were prepping for this, you talked about how important it is to identify the adult part when starting therapy. What is the adult part? What are these parts?
Yeah.
And how is that helpful in treating codependency?
Yeah. So parts work as a whole approach. It's a really broad term for different types of modalities, including internal family systems and ego state therapy. And then there's something, I don't know if it's an official modality, but approach at least, called the adult chair. And so, yes, basically, an adult part is a part that is our highest, wisest self, that is able to live in truth, live in the present moment, see facts for what they are, not go into creating stories, and is able to be the one to look at an emotion and validate it. So if you think of it almost like yourself as an adult going over to a little kid, and the kid is crying, you kind of ask them first, like, what's wrong? How are you feeling? Oh, I'm feeling sad because this happened. Help that, validating their feelings and helping them validate it, and then figuring out what to do about it. And so this process can happen within ourselves too, once we sort of learn when we're in our adults, when we're in younger parts.
Right.
So the adult part is really is really important. And in my opinion, for the hierarchy of treatment, and this is the part that's going to be setting boundaries for you and going to be communicating and doing all these things in order to create safety. So an example I always give my clients is I used to work with kids, and a lot of them were living in actively traumatizing home environments. And there was not a lot we could do in terms of trauma treatment. It's really hard to take away symptoms of trauma or anxiety or depression, frankly, when you're living in an actively traumatizing environment. And it's actually kind of unethical because you need those symptoms to survive. And so it's like, well, we don't want to take away your dissociation and hypervigilance because you actually need those things. Mm-hmm. And as a kid, you don't have control over your environment at all. But as an adult, you do. And so creating that environment that includes boundaries and, starting to make more healthy adult decisions will reduce and eliminate the need for a lot of these symptoms. So it's important to start there and then go into being able to like reprocess more intense trauma, anxiety, things like that. Helps it move a lot more quickly.
Right.
Yeah.
So establishing an adult part
to,
right, provide safety, create safety, set boundaries.
Yes. And really, like I tell people, we kind of touched on this earlier, I think we can talk all day about anxiety, depression, trauma, do reprocessing, but unless you're doing something about it and we're, sending you back after therapy into an environment where it is safe and you're creating that safety, not much is it's not gonna fully move. Maybe we'll see some progress, but the anxiety will stay, the depression will stay.
Right. And can you share an example? We've, on the podcast thus far, in solo casts or with guests, we have talked about our internal child, right? So with this language, the child part of us.
Yeah.
What's an example of that with codependency?
With codependency, well, I usually the way we know we're in a child part is like extreme emotion. So anything really visceral. So any type of emotion really. And really just using unsophisticated coping skills. So things that you would think of like a 5-year-old doing, that many adults do, but shutting down, throwing a little tantrum, avoiding, just kind of using coping skills that were available to you when you were younger at the time. But now that you are in your 30s, it's time for an update. Like we got to update the operating system. How would an adult handle this situation? So anytime, you notice yourself sort of using those less sophisticated coping skills that and I feel like we can feel it. It's like, oh, I feel like a kid right now. Like this sucks and it makes me feel worse. So, and specifically related to codependency, I mean, gosh, I don't know, there's so many examples, but I think, one would be, like feeling, abandoned or rejected by our partner if they're setting a healthy boundary toward us.
Right. In the first few years of, not the first few years, thankfully, early on dating my husband, I, with a previous ex who, it was with this ex, it was arguably the most codependent relationship I had. And I say arguably because I probably was more codependent with my mom and dad. I just wasn't as conscious of it. Nothing like a good toxic boyfriend to really bring it all out at once.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So very codependent, and he was dishonest and I knew it. He was cheating on me and I knew it. And he would, be late, show up suspiciously. And, that what that translated to with my now husband, he would run a couple minutes late, Gina. And I would have this visceral reaction where I would feel anxious. My breath would get shallow. I would text him, "Where are you?" I would feel abandoned, 2-3 minutes. And then he'd show up and I'd be like, "Where were you?" It's like, there was traffic. And I was like, "You need to be here when you said you'd be here," which is true, but it's also like, where's that? It's 5:03. And I would totally, so I would be having this child part response, and it was connected to this ex-boyfriend and the abandonment that I felt in that relationship. And I'm sure times in my past, I can't remember consciously, where I felt abandoned by my parents. So just this compounded abandonment. And then here I was just losing it after a couple minutes.
Yeah.
Oh, child part.
It's a perfect example. Yeah.
Oh, child part.
I know.
And so with your adult, the work that you do with your clients, establishing, being able to, on my own, observe, right? Notice what the need is.
Yeah.
And the need would be, right. I sense, especially coming out of that previous relationship, I did need a sense of security.
Yeah.
But the adult part of me would have said, "Marissa, you just started dating this guy. This is part of the process. You don't have an engagement ring. You're gonna have to feel vulnerable at times. You're gonna have to navigate establishing a relationship.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to feel the nerves and vulnerability of it possibly not working out.
Yeah.
But it's okay. Take some deep breaths.
Exactly.
He's on his way. Yeah. Other thoughts on the adult part?
I mean, I do. This is kind of scratching the surface because I use a lot of ego state therapy, which is so deeply moving and beautiful. And so we do so much with this. This is like eventually ego state therapy. Yeah.
Ego state. Got it.
Yeah. So eventually we use the adult part to go back to younger parts, sit with them, be with them, understand their perspective, tell them what they needed to hear, kind of reparent, bring them up into the present moment, have them orient to the safety of the present, understand that there is an adult now running the show, and sort of unburden them from these roles that they've been having to play that are often way beyond their years of, a 5-year-old worrying about very adult things. So, yeah.
Right. And it is scratching the surface. I'm sure if I was your client, I could show up with that 3-minute, moment in time. We could spend a whole session, if not multiple sessions.
Yes. Definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So establishing the adult part is key. And in your work, right? You establish the adult part. You let your clients know there's codependency here that we need to address. They go out empowered after seeing you, and they start to set boundaries, assert their needs, say no, address unhealthy patterns. What happens? How do you support them when they come back and say, everyone's violating my boundaries, no one's listening, my family, they're all jerks and mocking my attempts. This isn't working, Gina.
Yeah. I say, great. This is a really healthy sign. We're in this phase of therapy now. And
I love it.
Really hard phase, maybe the hardest phase. And sometimes I think I need to start a group, because I hear it from almost every client who does start setting boundaries. And people get really pissed off in their lives for many reasons.
Yeah.
They're not used to them setting boundaries. I'll talk about this in a moment, but many people it tends to be that many people in their lives might be on the narcissistic scale. And so, yeah, they're getting really negative feedback. And I always tell clients at the beginning, I'm like, little disclaimer, like, people, you might lose some relationships. Relationships might change. That's not the goal of our treatment at all. In fact, I wish it were the opposite, but this is just sort of the reality. If you are going to do the work, if people aren't pissed off at you, you're probably not setting enough boundaries or strong enough boundaries. And it's really hard. It can feel really lonely. I have clients just like, what am I doing? This is the phase where I think if you're not in and you kind of try on your own, then all of a sudden you stop and you're like, no, like, this isn't working out. And so, yeah. And what happens, what I tend to notice with my clients is, like, some of them, they're like, gosh, like, everyone in my life, they're just like, giving me this really negative feedback. Am I doing something wrong? Like, maybe it is me. Maybe I'm wrong for doing this. And then we kind of do an assessment of people in their lives. As you probably know, codependent people tend to attract people sort of on the narcissistic scale into their lives. The two are like moths to a flame. And so what happens is, I notice a lot of my clients do have, just from years of being codependent, have attracted people into their lives who are somewhat on the narcissistic scale. And when you start to set boundaries with someone like that, you get hostility, gaslighting, defensiveness, and it can make you feel crazy, and it can make you feel like you're wrong. And so it is necessary to kind of go through and look at, like, okay, what's the personality and character structure of this person, and kind of undo that psychological gaslighting of, like, no, you're not wrong. Like, you are barely asking for anything here. Like, you are expressing the most minute emotion here. But it's a really hard phase. It is. So I just want to normalize that for anyone going through the process. Yeah, it's hard.
I know and sense that with my now husband, thankfully, he wasn't codependent and showing up 5 minutes early to ward off my anxiety attacks, right? That would have been enabling my need to control and like need for security all the time, which isn't realistic.
Yeah.
But I do remember early on, I would identify a need. I would assert a need, a realistic need. Like, he didn't know that the evenings, the time, like, days would go by, maybe we wouldn't see each other. And I was like, we need to have a nightly call, talk about our days and support each other. And he's like, okay. So yeah, like I sense when going through what your clients are going through, what the listeners are going through, identifying their codependency, wanting to change relationships, the people who are responsive, it's so reassuring.
It's the best. And I'm like, those are the green flags. That's what we want. Those people who are willing to let you grow and who don't like you because of your lack of boundaries. They like you. And that is what you're looking for. But it can be hurtful in the process of finding out who maybe only was having a relationship to some extent because of the pattern that was set up that's been hurting you. And yeah, it's hard. It's that authenticity versus attachment again. And that the dream is to have both, to be authentic in who you are and to be accepted for who you are and attached. But some people have to choose like being authentic, and other people don't like it and cut them off. And it's really hard.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, like in the work that you've done and witnessed within yourself and with your clients, why is it worth, right, the quote unquote the good fight? Like, why persist when we're met with negative feedback, when we're met with those who maybe are more narcissistic pushing back? Why would you encourage us to not give up and just remain codependent?
It might not be worth it for everyone, I'll say that. And I think for the people who it is worth it for, they come because they're just so resentful, burnt out, and they're like, I can't, they've hit a breaking point. Like, I can't not be myself anymore, or I can't, live with this anxiety, depression, like feeling out of alignment and discontent. And so it's worth it for them. But it might not be worth it for everybody. And I would understand that.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
I look at some people in my family. I look and listen to or read about like autobiographies or people. I'm like, wow, they really stuck with it. They stuck with the codependency, and it's not apparently unlivable.
Right. There's some rewards to it. And yeah, it's not unlivable for everybody. But I think for me, it was unlivable. Sometimes it really starts to even affect like your physical health. And, we see so many manifestations of it. And so that's typically when people call a therapist and they're like, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
The toll.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So for you want to eat your chips. You want to make
my damn chips? I love chips. Yeah. I don't want a life without chips.
Right.
Exactly.
All right. Well, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts to share? Reflections on codependency and the work that you do?
I mean, just one other thing. I think it's a beautiful practice to somehow start tracking your progress in and outside of therapy. And for a few reasons. One, people who are on the codependent scale tend to not, celebrate themselves very much. And the way that I do this is, I'm like, into astrology. So this works for me. I do it at every full moon. I have like a little full moon ceremony where I write down things I want to let go of and things I want to bring in. So it's not super formal in like goal writing. And I do it at the very least with my husband, but I also love to do it with friends or, just do it in community a little bit. It helps keep you accountable. And it's such a nice way to start to share your own journey and progress. And then I keep the pieces of paper so I can kind of look back. And there's also something about, saying something out loud, writing something down that does help your subconscious move toward doing it. And so this kind of goes back with the action stuff of like actually taking action. But I think it's a really nice way to hold yourself accountable for things, increase your community, and increase your ability to like share with your community, which is often something people who, again, are on the codependent scale, I think tend to not, they tend to be holding so much for others. But it's nice to share this and really like deepen relationships around you.
Right.
So just, encouraging people to think of a way that works for them and gels with them, to create as a ritual monthly, twice a month, whatever it is in your own life on the first of the month. Some of my clients do it through like journaling, but outside of therapy to really start to track and notice the progress, because there hopefully will be a lot of progress.
Mm-hmm. How come you specify outside of therapy?
Because therapy, we, at least for me, we tend to talk about accountability like on a weekly basis, which is great. But to me, this is a little bit bigger than that. And it incorporates your own community into it, not just your therapist.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
So
Accountability, community, sharing with your community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
How often are full moons?
It depends on the around every 28 days, I think, but it sort of can vary. Yeah. So about once a month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tracking progress.
Yeah.
Very nice. All right. Well, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
If someone is resonating, where can they find you?
Yeah, my website, northstartherapyinc.com. You can email me, Gina at northstartherapyinc.com. Call me, text me. My number is on my website.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll put links to your website and your email.
Okay.
People can go find your phone number.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was really great. I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye, everybody. Hey, girl. It's Marissa again. I'm not like a regular podcaster. I'm a cool podcaster, right? Thank you for listening and staying till the end. You can find me on Instagram at Therapy with Marissa. Email me, Marissa at codependummy.com. Check out codependummy.com for more information on the show. And baby girl, a subscribe, rating, and review would be much appreciated. Till next time, I want you to remember, if you are feeling unseen, I see you. If you are feeling unheard, I hear you. And if you think that you don't matter, know that you matter to me. I want you to go out there so you can stop playing small and start taking up space, you dummy. And now, the disclaimer. Girl, this is not therapy, and I am not your therapist. This podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regards to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, publisher, or guests are rendering any legal, clinical, or other professional service. If you want or need a professional, please find one.